She disappeared into Tibet for months. When she returned, her eyes had changed. She claimed she had seen what no Western soul ever had, spoken with immortal masters, unlocked memories of past lives, and glimpsed a future that terrified her. She didn't just study the occult, she lived it. They called her a witch, a liar, a prophet, a fraud, but no one, not even her worst enemies, ever called her boring. She dared to say this world is not what it seems, that your thought and your dreams and even your fears are echoes from something far older, far deeper. And then she made a promise to reveal the secret of the soul, but they didn't let her. She was silenced, mocked, buried beneath scandals, but her words survived. There is no religion higher than truth. Tonight we're going beyond the veil, to retrace the journey of a woman who shook empires, not with armies, but with questions no one dared to ask. What if it's true? What if reality is an illusion, and you've been asleep your whole life? Helena Blavatsky may have been the most dangerous mind of the 19th century, because she didn't want followers. She wanted you to wake up. Are you ready to see what she saw? She was born Helena Petrovna von Hahn in 1831, in the Russian Empire, a land torn between aristocratic traditions and a rising tide of scientific rationalism. Even as a child, she was different, curious, restless, drawn to old myths, symbols, and tales of hidden knowledge. While other children played with dolls, Helena explored dusty libraries and stared at the stars, asking questions no one could answer. By age 17, she had done something unthinkable for a young noblewoman of her time. She fled, left behind her family, her class, and the role society had written for her. What followed was a life that reads like a myth, a journey across continents, cultures, and dimensions of thought. From Egypt to India, from London to Tibet, Blavatsky wandered through temples, deserts, and occult circles. She claimed to have met mystics, sages, and even masters, beings who guided her toward a vast ancient wisdom. Whether literal or symbolic, these encounters transformed her. The 19th century was an era of extremes. On one hand, science was exploding. Darwin's evolution, Newtonian physics, industrial revolutions. On the other, religion was struggling to hold on to meaning, losing ground to skepticism. Spiritualism rose in popularity, promising contact with the dead, but often descending into parlor tricks and fraud. Into this world stepped Blavatsky, neither scientist nor priest, but something else entirely. She offered a third way, theosophy, a philosophy that claimed to unify the truths behind all religions, while embracing the mysteries of existence. What is theosophy? The word means divine wisdom. But for Blavatsky, it wasn't just a label, it was a mission. She believed there existed an ancient knowledge, older than any scripture, hidden beneath the surface of world myths, symbols, and philosophies. Her goal, to uncover it, revive it, and share it with humanity. Her first major work, Isis Unveiled, attacked both blind faith and blind skepticism. She challenged materialist science and literalist religion alike. She didn't want people to believe. She wanted them to seek, to think, to remember. Then came her magnum opus, The Secret Doctrine. Dense, symbolic, sometimes maddening, but also visionary. It spoke of cosmic cycles, spiritual evolution, and hidden laws behind the visible world. It proposed that humanity wasn't a fallen species, but a rising one, evolving not just physically but spiritually. She also wrote The Voice of the Silence, a poetic, haunting guide for those on the inner path. It wasn't about outer miracles, but inner transformation. Not about worship, but about becoming. Blavatsky didn't just write, she provoked. She confronted Western arrogance, questioned colonial attitudes, and insisted that Eastern philosophies held keys to truths long forgotten in Europe. She urged readers to look beyond appearances, beyond dogma, beyond the material. Her presence was electrifying. With her piercing eyes, sharp tongue, and unshakable confidence, she gathered followers and critics. To some, she was a fraud. To others, a genius. To many, a signpost pointing beyond the veil. She helped found the Theosophical Society in 1875, along with Colonel Henry Olcott and others. Their aim wasn't conversion, but exploration. They promoted three goals: to form a universal brotherhood of humanity, to encourage the study of comparative religion and science, and to investigate the powers latent in the human being. Theosophy wasn't a religion. It was a call to wake up. Her influence didn't stop with mystics. She impacted psychology, inspiring early thinkers like Carl Jung, who echoed her belief in archetypes and the collective unconscious. She influenced feminists who saw in her a woman who refused to be silent, submissive, or secondary. She shaped occult movements, new religious thought, and even art and literature. But more than anything, Blavatsky was a disruptor. She didn't offer comfort. She offered challenge. She asked, "What if everything you know is only a fraction of what is?" In an age of binaries, science versus faith, east versus west, reason versus intuition, she stood in the tension, bridging opposites. She didn't always succeed, but she always tried. And in doing so, she lit a fire, one that still burns. The world was her classroom, and her mission? To uncover a forgotten truth buried in the ruins of ancient civilizations and the rituals of secret brotherhoods. Helena Blavatsky didn't just travel, she searched. Her voyages weren't for adventure, they were a pilgrimage, a path toward unlocking the wisdom of a primordial tradition. Her first stop was Egypt, a land of sand and secrets. There, under the shadow of the pyramids, Blavatsky met members of hidden occult circles. These were not charlatans or performers. They were guardians of arcane knowledge, initiates of ancient hermetic orders that claimed lineage from the Egyptian priesthood. She was initiated into rites whose origins predated the pharaohs. In candlelit chambers filled with symbols of Anubis and Thoth, she partook in rituals to awaken inner vision. She studied the Hermetic texts, works that taught the correspondence between spirit and matter, mind and cosmos. The emerald tablet became her compass. One phrase echoed in her thoughts: "As above, so below." It would shape her understanding of the spiritual and the material worlds as reflections of one another. From Egypt, she moved to Greece, not for beaches or ruins, but for wisdom. She sought the last echoes of the Eleusinian mysteries and the Pythagorean initiatory schools. In crumbling monasteries and remote islands, she chased the whispers of Platonic thought, convinced that these philosophies held the spiritual DNA of humanity. From the cradle of Western thought, her path led westward across oceans, to Mexico, where she investigated ancient Toltec rites and Aztec cosmology. She believed that the ancient civilizations of the Americas preserved the same esoteric truths in different symbols: pyramids, serpents, sacred calendars. But perhaps the most transformative leg of her journey was her time in India. There, in the foothills of the Himalayas, she immersed herself in the world of Tantra and Vedanta. She wandered sacred sites, spoke with yogis in hidden ashrams, and learned from Brahmins who passed down teachings orally, generation after generation. She began to see a pattern. Whether in Egypt, Greece, Mexico, or India, there was a shared core, a primordial tradition, a universal doctrine lost to time awaiting rediscovery. She named it the Secret Doctrine long before writing it. For her, it wasn't just philosophy. It was a spiritual DNA shared across humanity's civilizations. In 1875, with this vision taking form, she met Colonel Henry Steele Olcott in America, a lawyer and spiritual seeker. Their meeting was electric, fateful. Together, they founded the Theosophical Society. Its mission: to revive that lost universal wisdom, bridge science and spirit, and unite East and West. New York City, chaotic and bustling, became the birthplace of a movement that would soon echo through continents. But the world wasn't ready. Blavatsky began facing growing opposition. Skeptics mocked her. The press distorted her. Yet the deeper she went, the stranger things became. Suddenly, she vanished. For years, no one knew where she was. Rumors spread. Some claimed she had gone mad. Others whispered she had been taken to a monastery in Tibet. Later, she confirmed it. In coded phrases and scattered recollections, she spoke of entering a remote Himalayan monastery. But this was no ordinary retreat. She claimed to have met the Mahatmas, spiritual masters who lived in isolation, hidden from the world, guarding a knowledge that predated even Atlantis. She described them not as gods, but as beings of extraordinary evolution, beyond our physical and mental limitations. Some said they lived for centuries. These beings, the masters of wisdom, were said to communicate telepathically, project their consciousness, and traverse dimensions of time and space. Among them were Master Morya and Kut Humi. Blavatsky described them in vivid detail, down to the color of their robes, their height, their gaze. But the most shocking evidence wasn't Blavatsky's words. It was the letters, physical documents said to have materialized from nowhere, written by the Mahatmas. These Mahatma letters were received by several respected witnesses, including A.P. Sinnett. They often appeared in locked rooms or fell from the ceiling. Their handwriting was analyzed. Their content was complex. Esoteric teachings, philosophical dialogues, and instructions for the Theosophical movement. Even the British Society for Psychical Research investigated the letters. Though divided, some members admitted something unexplainable was happening. Blavatsky spoke of astral travel, claiming to project her consciousness across the globe. She described visiting other worlds, past lives, and karmic realms. She didn't just talk, she demonstrated. Objects appeared from thin air, messages materialized, witnesses were baffled. Many honest skeptics turned into cautious believers. In letters and journals, she detailed visions of ancient civilizations, Atlantis, Lemuria, recalling events as if she had lived through them. For Blavatsky, these weren't dreams. They were real experiences accessed through rituals, concentration, and higher states of consciousness. In Tibet, she said, the final veil was lifted. The Mahatmas initiated her into advanced doctrines that included the laws of karma and reincarnation. She learned that every action plants a seed. Karma, she taught, was not punishment, but cosmic balance, a law of spiritual cause and effect across lifetimes. Reincarnation to her was evolution. Souls return, not in circles, but in a spiral, gaining experience, refining consciousness, moving closer to truth. She was told of the spiritual hierarchy, a ladder of beings from human to divine, each with a role in guiding the cosmos, with the Mahatmas near the top. Each life, each struggle, was part of a larger spiritual curriculum. Blavatsky taught that suffering itself could be sacred, an opportunity for evolution. She brought back teachings that shook the foundations of dogmatic religion. The soul, she claimed, wasn't born once, it was ancient, eternal, ever-becoming. Blavatsky didn't just study this wisdom, she embodied it. She believed her mission wasn't personal salvation, but the awakening of the world. People around her began noticing. Her presence, her gaze, her energy, it all hinted at a mind not entirely confined to this world. She would often pause mid-conversation, as if listening to voices from another realm. She said she was receiving instruction from the masters. Her followers saw her as a messenger, a link between Earth and the hidden schools of wisdom. Her enemies saw her as a dangerous fraud. But to both, she was impossible to ignore. Her return from Tibet wasn't triumphant, it was transformative. She spoke with newfound urgency. Her writings deepened. Her aura changed. She began laying the foundations of her magnum opus, The Secret Doctrine. But the book would be more than pages, it would be a portal. Every paragraph, every symbol, every citation, it was crafted to awaken the reader's latent memory of truths long forgotten. She said she wasn't teaching anything new, only reminding us of what our souls already knew. The world around her seemed to shift. Strange synchronicities followed her. Dreams, visions, strange visitors. Her life was becoming more myth than history. But this was only the beginning. The stage was set, the veils were lifted. The voices of the past spoke again, and the climax of her journey was near. The winds whispered through the Himalayan peaks, carrying chants older than civilization itself. Within the stone walls of a remote Tibetan monastery, Helena Blavatsky sat cross-legged, shrouded in silence and incense smoke. This was no ordinary retreat. It was a moment of transformation. The Tibetan monks, draped in saffron robes, surrounded her in a sacred circle, their deep chants echoing like the heartbeat of the earth. The air vibrated with a sense of otherworldly presence. Blavatsky's initiation in the monastery was not a single event, but a prolonged passage through trials of the mind and spirit. She was tested in ways few can comprehend: fasting, isolation, sensory deprivation. The aim was to dissolve the ego, to make way for the higher self. Days blurred into nights as she meditated in cavernous silence. When she emerged, she claimed to have achieved states of consciousness far beyond the waking mind. She described it as a vast silence filled with meaning. In those states, she reported visions of radiant beings, the so-called Mahatmas, and communication not in words, but in pure thought. Her consciousness, she said, expanded beyond the physical form. It hovered over valleys, cities, and even the planet itself. She claimed to perceive the interconnectedness of all beings, seeing every soul as a spark from the same divine fire. One of the most controversial aspects of her journey were the accounts of spiritual channeling. In quiet trances, Blavatsky would enter a state of apparent detachment, and her hand would move rapidly over the page, writing messages she insisted did not come from her own mind. This was automatic writing, a phenomenon where the conscious self is bypassed to let higher wisdom come through. Dozens of notebooks were filled with messages allegedly transmitted from the masters. They spoke of ancient civilizations, cosmic laws, and the secret history of humanity. These writings, dense and esoteric, became the foundation for the secret doctrine and ISIS unveiled. Whether one believes in channeling or not, the depth and complexity of these texts is undeniable. But it wasn't only writing. Witnesses, including prominent members of the Theosophical Society, reported physical phenomena that defied natural explanation. Letters from the Mahatmas would materialize seemingly out of thin air, often in locked rooms or during moments of intense meditation. These events were so frequent that they were documented and investigated by skeptical observers. One investigator, Richard Hodgson of the Society for Psychical Research, initially sought to expose Blavatsky as a fraud. But even he, despite skepticism, had to admit that some phenomena were beyond ordinary trickery. Materialized objects, such as jewels or symbolic tokens, were produced during ceremonies. In one account, Blavatsky reportedly appeared in 2 different cities at once, a phenomenon known as bilocation. There were also reports of levitation. During a retreat in India, members claimed to have seen her body lifted off the ground while in deep trance. No wires, no stage, just silence, breathless onlookers, and the defiance of gravity. The accounts were consistent, spanning years and continents. But perhaps the most intimate of her supernatural experiences were the visions of her past lives. In private letters and public lectures, she revealed memories of a life as an Egyptian priestess, guiding souls through rituals of the afterlife. In another vision, she described being an initiate in ancient India, learning the sacred science of mantras and inner alchemy. These memories came in flashes, not dreams, but vivid, full sensory recollections. In one letter she wrote, "I walked barefoot on the burning sands not as Helena, but as one who bore the secrets of the temples. I heard the voice of the Nile, and it spoke of eternity." To her followers, these recollections affirmed the doctrine of reincarnation and the immortality of the soul. Life, she said, was not linear but cyclical. We return again and again, evolving, refining, remembering. Yet the most profound vision, the one that shaped her entire philosophy, was what she called the vision of the soul's plan. In deep meditation, Blavatsky claimed to see a great wheel turning through cosmic time. On this wheel were countless points of light, human souls, each moving through cycles of experience. She said this vision revealed the true nature of evolution, not merely physical or biological, but spiritual. Humanity was not alone, not random, not lost. We were part of a vast, guided journey. The soul learns through suffering, joy, birth, and death, and at the center of it all a divine spark, a fragment of the eternal. In this revelation, she saw the spiritual unity of all traditions, the Egyptian mysteries, the Vedas of India, the wisdom of the Druids, the teachings of Christ. All were branches from the same ancient root. The true teachings were hidden in symbols, myths, and rituals, waiting to be decoded. Her life mission, then, was to unveil these truths. The Theosophical Society was not just an organization. It was a vessel to carry the perennial wisdom into the modern world. She believed that when people awakened to the spiritual laws that govern reality, suffering would decrease, conflict would dissolve, and humanity would step into a new age. "There is no religion higher than truth," she wrote. And to her, truth was not owned by any one faith, but lived in the inner sanctum of the soul. The climax of her journey was not a single event, but a cascade of revelations and manifestations, a life flooded with the mystical. She blurred the boundaries between the seen and unseen, between science and spirit, between time and eternity. Whether you see her as a mystic, a visionary, or a symbol of the human quest for meaning, her experiences challenge us to ask, what lies beyond the veil of the visible world? What if our senses are merely the threshold, not the limit? Helena Blavatsky stood at that threshold and walked through it, and she came back with stories the world was not ready to hear. In the end, her message was clear. The divine spark lives within each of us. Our purpose is to remember, to evolve, and to seek the light hidden in the dark. That is the legacy of her supernatural journey. Not just phenomena, but transformation. Not spectacle, but spiritual awakening. And for those willing to look beyond appearances, her life remains a door to the mysteries that still whisper in the winds of the Himalayas. Blavatsky's most radical claim was deceptively simple. Everything is connected. Not metaphorically, but literally. All of existence, from the smallest atom to the farthest star, is part of one universal essence. This idea wasn't a romantic abstraction. For her, it was the cornerstone of an ancient truth preserved through time by initiates of sacred traditions. In today's fragmented world, this message becomes even more powerful. What if your thoughts weren't isolated? What if your intentions, your choices, and your emotions echoed through a larger web of reality? This is what Blavatsky proposed, that consciousness is not confined to the skull, and that our spiritual growth impacts the world around us. Central to this worldview is the concept of karma. To her, karma wasn't punishment, it was education, a cosmic feedback loop teaching us, through pain or joy, the consequences of our choices. Apply this idea today, and life becomes a school. Every interaction becomes a mirror, every injustice a test, every act of kindness a seed. This redefinition of karma empowers personal responsibility. You're not a victim of chance, you're a co-creator of your path. Whether you're struggling in a toxic job, enduring a breakup, or battling depression, Blavatsky would urge you to ask, what lesson is hidden here? But to decode these lessons, one must turn inward. Self-knowledge was, to Blavatsky, the highest form of wisdom. Her writings return again and again to the call, know thyself. Not in the modern therapeutic sense of self-analysis, but in the mystical sense, realizing the divine core within. You are not your trauma. You are not your name. You are a spark of an eternal fire. In an age of noise and distraction, this is revolutionary. While society pushes you to look outward, to scroll, to consume, to compare, Blavatsky asks you to become still, to listen, to meditate, not just to relax, but to awaken, to pierce the illusion of separateness. This leads us to another of her key critiques: dogmatic religion and scientific materialism. She wasn't anti-religion. She was against blind faith. And she wasn't anti-science. She was against arrogance. Blavatsky believed both could serve the truth if they dropped their egos and worked together. Religion, she said, often enslaves the mind with fear and rigid belief. Science, in contrast, dismisses the invisible as unreal. But what if both are wrong? What if reality includes dimensions neither the priest nor the physicist can yet perceive? Blavatsky wanted to build a bridge between mysticism and logic, between ancient insight and modern discovery, and at the heart of her teachings was compassion. True spiritual evolution, she believed, wasn't measured by visions or powers, but by how much one served others. She spoke of an ethical ladder, and each step wasn't climbed through ritual, but through kindness, humility, and love. This idea resonates deeply today. In a world overwhelmed by selfishness and division, Blavatsky's call to serve humanity feels prophetic. She saw the world as a single organism, and suffering in one part was pain for the whole. To help another, even in silence, was to heal the soul of the world. She dreamed of a new human being. Not a saint or a guru, but someone spiritually awakened, emotionally intelligent and ethically rooted. This new human would rise above prejudice, live in harmony with nature, and see through the illusions of status and ego. This was the Theosophical ideal, a bridge between the divine and the earthly. These weren't abstract hopes. Her work inspired thinkers and changemakers across the globe. Carl Jung was influenced by her model of layered consciousness. Mahatma Gandhi found moral strength in her teachings of unity and karma. Jiddu Krishnamurti, a spiritual icon of the 20th century, was discovered by theosophists and nurtured under their guidance. Even in art, literature, and psychology, her fingerprints remain. The archetypes of Joseph Campbell, the collective unconscious, the mythic hero's journey, all echo her vision of an inner spiritual path encoded in the human experience. So what does this mean for you today, sitting in front of a screen? It means there's a path beneath the chaos, a pattern beneath the pain. Blavatsky would say, "You are not lost. You are exactly where your soul needs to be, but you must awaken." She offers no quick fixes, no viral life hacks, just a simple, powerful invitation. Start your inner journey, seek truth, serve others, and awaken the divine within you. And maybe, just maybe, you're not watching this video by accident. Maybe, like countless others before, you're being called, not to believe, but to question, to explore, to remember who you are. What if the awakening of the soul isn't a fantasy, but a forgotten truth? Blavatsky didn't want followers. She wanted seekers, people who refused to accept the surface of things, people who dared to dig deeper, to think for themselves, to feel beyond the five senses. And so, as we close this chapter in her story, the real question becomes, are you ready to begin your own? Because the story of the soul, your soul, is just getting started. Blavatsky was called many things: madwoman, fraud, prophetess, witch, but never irrelevant. Her presence disturbed, intrigued, and ignited debate wherever she went. Because no matter how outrageous her claims seemed, she struck a nerve. The true power of her legacy lies not in phenomena, but in consciousness, in waking people up from the trance of ordinary life, in daring them to ask, what if there's more? What if the world is not as fixed and solid as it appears? In an age drunk on certainty, she stood as a monument to mystery. When the materialists claimed, only what can be measured is real, she countered, then you've measured too little. When religion preached fear and shame, she whispered, you are divine. Her voice was a defiant spark in a world turning mechanical. Her writings weren't polished doctrines. They were spiritual detonators, meant to shatter illusions and force the reader to see with new eyes. Even today, decades after her death, she remains controversial. And that, in itself, is telling, because those who conform disappear, but those who challenge, they echo. Blavatsky challenged the great twin illusions of the modern world, that matter is all there is and that we are all separate. She said, no, there is spirit, there is unity, there is something behind the veil. Whether you believe in her stories of levitation or channeling is beside the point. What matters is the impulse beneath them, the bold cry that reality is deeper than we know. And that cry, that's what still resonates. She didn't seek to build a new church. She wanted to break the walls of all temples and say, the divine is within you. Not in idols, not in systems, but in your breath, your heart, your intuition. To walk her path is not to believe blindly, but to explore, to feel your own soul moving beneath the noise of modern life, to listen when silence speaks. She knew the cost of this path: ridicule, isolation, misunderstanding. But she walked it anyway. Because awakening, real awakening, is rarely met with applause. Blavatsky's story is not about miracles. It's about courage. Courage to stand alone, to speak inconvenient truths, to defy consensus reality, to say, there is more, and I have seen it. In that sense, she was less a guru and more a trailblazer, a psychic explorer mapping the inner cosmos. So what can we learn from her? First, to question, to refuse secondhand truths, to investigate, not cynically but openly, with childlike wonder and grown-up discernment. Second, to live ethically. Her spiritual path wasn't about escape. It was about service, about lifting others, healing wounds, softening hearts. Third, to embrace uncertainty. She taught that mystery isn't the enemy, it's the invitation. It's what keeps the soul alive. You don't need to travel to Tibet or study ancient texts to begin. You just need to pause, to turn inward, to ask, what am I really? And listen with your whole being. Because maybe you felt it, in dreams, in déjà vu, in those unexplainable moments of deep knowing. Maybe part of you already remembers something ancient. That is the thread she invites you to follow. It's not easy. This path requires integrity, patience, and heart. But the reward is immense, not power, not recognition, but freedom. Freedom from fear, from superficiality, from the smallness of ego. It's the freedom of becoming who you were meant to be. Blavatsky wasn't perfect. She was flawed, fierce, brilliant, and infuriating. But above all, she was awake, and she wanted the same for you. In a world addicted to distractions, she calls us to depth. In a time of division, she calls us to unity. In a culture of noise, she calls us to silence. And so we close this story not with certainty, but with possibility. What if you're more than flesh and bone? What if your life has meaning beyond survival? What if the universe is conscious, and you are part of its awakening? These questions aren't answered by belief. They are answered by experience. Go, meditate, study, question, love, serve. Let these ideas be not just information, but transformation. Because maybe, just maybe, you didn't find this message. Maybe it found you. Not to convince you, but to remind you that you are part of something vast, that truth matters, that the soul is real, and that now, more than ever, the world needs seekers, not followers. Seekers. There is no religion higher than truth. The motto of the Theosophical Society.